In this video, we're going to subdivide each segment of our curve, and we're going to also take into account the positioning of the posts that are going to be at the intersection between each one of the curve segments, and then figure out how many pickets we're going to be placing between the posts themselves. And we're going to do so in a way that will not, hopefully, create an intersection between the posts and the pickets itself. So if you scale the posts and make them a little bit wider, the edges of those posts will not intersect with the edge of the pickets. And this is going to be user controlled. So let's get to it. The first thing that I want to do is actually create the pickets themselves. And just like with the posts, we're going to use a box to represent them. And I'm going to call this picket. And the size that I'm going to give those pickets right now, if we zoom in, is going to be 0.25 on the X. We're going to make them 2 on the Y and 0.4 on the Z. So we basically have little pickets that look like this. And the next step will be to position it on the grid. So again, we can use side effects, axis align. Side effects labs, axis align to be precise. I'm going to put that here. And once you enable the display, make sure that the justify Y is set to min. So that should position the picket on grid. Okay. To get this working properly, we are going to use a for each primitive loop, so we can iterate over each one of the segments of our curve. Okay, so if you recall from the last video, after we split the fence itself, so we have now a primitive for each one of these segments. So drop in a for each primitive, and this will allow us then to iterate over each one of these segments. Okay, so if you go to the end, you should see all of it, and it also will tell you which iteration we are at the moment and the total number of segments that we have. The next node that will allow us to actually control this is going to be the carve node. And the carve node allows us to control the width of each one of the segments. So by enabling this right now with my for each end displayed, you can see that they don't touch anymore, and that's because of the two first parameters, the first U and second U. So currently only the first U is enabled, and if you move the slider, you can see that that point is moving. If you set it to 0, they will connect, but if you increase that, they will disconnect. Now, we want to ensure that these points are equidistant. So we don't have only one point moving, we want both of them moving, but also to make sure that they are both moving at the same rate. So for that, we're going to enable the second U. And you can see that you can now adjust both ends of the curve segments. Just going to put it on the carve node so we can focus only on a single one for now. So the trick to make this equidistant and move at the same time will be to grab the value of the second U and subtract it from 1 so we can get the first U. So right click on the second U, copy parameter, go to the first U, right click and paste relative reference, Okay. Now, if you just do that by itself, you're not going to see anything because both of them have the same value, so they override and cancel each other. So what you have to do is put your cursor in front of the ch domain u2 and put 1 minus. As we, just for demo purposes, if I have 0.8 in my second u, my first u is going to be 1 minus 0.8, which would be 0.2. And if you slide only the second u, you'll see that the curve remains equidistant on both sides. They do what they're supposed to do. Just don't move it less than 0.5 because then, again, they will get to that point where they override each other and it won't be a good thing. In any case, the values that we're going to put in here are not going to impact that and never going to be less than 0.5. Now, the other thing that you want to ensure is that the width of the posts on Z, so if I go now to the posts node, we also want to incorporate this number into the calculations because, as I said, we want to know what this value of the post is going to be, and also once we start putting the pickets in between, we want to ensure that they don't intersect. So for the next bit, we're going to go to posts, you're going to go to size Z, right click on it and copy parameter. Okay, so we're copying this parameter. Go back to carve, and in the second u, right click and paste relative reference. Okay, so you should have the post size. And then in front of it, you're going to type 1 plus. And after it, you're going to divide it by 2 because we have 2 posts. What you will get right now is 0 to 1, which is the full extent of the curve. But as you start creating your posts, and again, this is just a temporary placeholder, you might be bringing another mesh from outside. It will take that into consideration and it will do the best to adapt to whatever width you set to this. So this should be what you currently have right now, and it will work, and you'll see how we're going to set that up. So let's rename these properly. So this will be carve fence segment. And the magic is going to happen in the next 2 nodes. We're going to put in a attribute wrangle, which we're going to rename our picketSpacer. So I'm going to show you something that you might or might not know, but the first thing to do with this picketSpacer is to ensure that we're running over primitives. Okay, this is really important. Run over primitives because we're going to be running over each one of the segments. We're going to need information from the fence segment itself. So one way to do it is by calling the name of the fence segment, but if you look at the attribute wrangle, you notice that you have additional ancillary input. So we're going to use that. We're simply going to drag from the carve fence output into the first ancillary input. And the way that the attribute wrangle works is that these ancillary inputs are set, they're 0 index. So the first one is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, for a total of 4. So that should enable us to grab the information from it, and I'll show you how it's going to be implemented. So rather than me typing all the code for you, I'm just going to paste it here and provide it to you in the comment, so you'll be able to take a look at what we're doing. I'm just going to go over it quickly. But what's happening is this. we're going to create a spacer slider, which is going to allow us to control the amount of space between the pickets. And this is something that you can expose later in the HDA or any type of UI control that you want to put in. And in order to see this, because we're using the channel float command, you'll have to click on this little slider spare parameter button. As soon as you do that, you'll see we have now a slider called spacer. And I have my geometry spreadsheet open down here, and you can see that as I start moving it, you'll see that the numbers here are changing. So we know that this is working. And again, these numbers are in the primitives. So that's what you should be seeing right now. So if you have your geometry spreadsheet, switch to primitives and move the spacer slider, and you should see numbers moving around, which is good. The next one, we need to grab the width of the posts. So again, the post that we have in here, we need to grab the Z size of the post. So this is going to be with this particular variable, the post width. And we also need the curve length. So remember, each one of our curves has a different length. You can see here between 0, 1, 2, like they're all slightly different. So as we iterate, we need to grab each one of those length per iteration. And this is why I connected the ancillary input 1, because when we write this expression, so I'm using the arclen expression, and in order to see it in Vex, you have to put in the backticks. So if you're using North American keyboard, it's going to be to the left of the number 1 key. So the first number that we see in here, this is the node that we're referencing, which is going to be the carve node. And again, because it's in the ancillary input, this is why we put a 1. And then these other numbers, so it's what we're referencing, and then the beginning and end of the curve. So 1001 should be the proper syntax for this command, and it should then give us what we require. And then right here, this is the picketSpacer that is going to provide us with the proper number that we need to configure how many pickets we're going to place. So it grabs the curve length and multiplies it by the spacer value. Okay, so it's going to give us that ratio. This final node in here, this will put in here the comment, take into consideration the width of the posts. So we're going to create an attribute, and you can see it's an attribute because instead of being just a variable, which starts with the actual definition of the variable, in this case float, when you put an f at, this is a float attribute, and this is what allows you to see it in the geometry spreadsheet. Another big differentiation between an attribute and a variable is that variables are the equivalent of local variables. They only work within the attribute wrangle. As soon as you make it an attribute, any other node can access those attributes. Okay, so this is the equivalent of making it a global variable, which can be accessed from anywhere in your network. And the reason I'm making it an attribute is because we're going to need this number for the next node coming up. Okay, so it's going to use a max function. So it's going to set up the max value, so the first value and the second value. And after a little bit of trial and error, this is the calculations needed to figure out exactly where those pickets are going to be placed to be just outside of the width of the posts. The next node we're going to put in is going to be a resample node. So this resample node is going to resample the number of segments. Okay, put it in here. As soon as you connect it, you're going to see that you have tons of points, and it's definitely not what we want, because number one, it sets you maximum segment length. So if you increase that, the numbers will decrease, but it's not the option we are going for. So you can disable this option, okay? And you have to enable maximum segments. This is the important bit, okay? So currently, it sets you 10 segments, but we want to make this dynamic per curve segment. The calculation is going to be as follows. We're going to use two expressions. One is going to be the prim expression, and the second one is going to be the bounding box expression. So the command is as follows. We're going to grab prim, and what it does is it returns the value of a primitive attribute. So we want to get the value of our adjustment spacer. So we're going to grab this value and divide it by the bounding box inside of the picket. So to get that working, we're going to open parentheses, first quote, dot, / and we need the picketSpacer. So I'll start typing picket. Here's the picketSpacer. And close quotes, comma 0, because that's the float prim number. And then I'm going to put another comma and then put in the name of the attribute. So it's adjustSpacer. Again, type it exactly as you've typed it in the attribute wrangle. Otherwise, you're going to get a syntax error. And then close quotes, comma 0, and close parentheses. So this is the primitive, or the prim rather, expression. And we're going to divide that by the bounding box of our picket and grab the DZ size of it. So divided by bounding box, open parentheses, open quotes, / we need the picket, close quotes, comma, and we need the DZ size. Okay, so all in capitals, D_Z size. And there you go. You should not have any errors. To check that it's working, click on your picketSpacer, and as you increase or decrease, it will adapt itself, and you can see that it's adjusting itself to the length of the curve. So for example, here there's only a single point while the other ones have 2 points, but then as you increase that, see, they all adapt and adjust themselves to the length of the segments. We are going to stop right here, and the next part will be to optimize the positioning of the pickets as well. But this for now should get us going and provide us with the right number of pickets that we're going to place. So I'll see you in the next video.